A new system, huh? Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Yeah,
So,
everybody can be seen.
great. So,
Where can I,
Hello? Hello, hello, hello.
We can hear you one moment.
Hello,
Okay.
now can you hear us?
I can hear you
Yes.
now and I can see you. How about that?
Woo!
Great.
We got a new system we're trying out.
Okay. Technology is great when it works.
Right.
Great. And if you know how to use it.
Like when you try to call into a council meeting.
Yeah,
you
try
can't
that
use it.
tonight. Try that tonight.
Wow, look at that harvest.
Depends on who's calling in too.
Jimmy responded, he will not be able to be here. He's in contract.
That looks like AI to me.
AI never looked this good. It's AD.
That's right, AD.
It's AD.
So Jim's not gonna be here, so whenever you wanna.
Okay.
Call the meeting to order.
I would like to call the meeting of the Elkhart Urban Enterprise Zone. Starting at what, 3:07?
304 according to the real clock.
3:00.
I got you.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the February 2nd meeting?
Make a motion to approve minutes.
I'll second.
Motion approved.
Oh,
We have to vote.
wait, with motion and a second.
Okay, sorry.
Now, all those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We have the ANOVA financial reports in front of us for January, February, and March.
I think historically, we've approved maybe the statement from Inova and Community Foundation. Same motion.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve both of the Inova statement and the Community Foundation statement.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the work and Boyne invoice for $88.
I'll second.
All in favor of the $88 invoice from Warwick and Boyne?
Aye.
Aye.
And we get a check drawn.
One other item before we move on to the business, Sherry and I have been working and coordinating with approval for the preparation of the 2025 tax returns. I think we got those today, kind of reviewed them. We were gonna share them with Jim and then have the board approve them at the next meeting to be submitted, so.
They wait to be paid to the next meeting, or do we need to do an appropriation up to a certain amount, then you guys can make that?
I don't think we have to pay anything. I think we're just filing the tax returns.
Okay, okay.
But, yeah.
Times it, they went within like 30 days, so I just didn't know.
Program service expenses.
We know the date that there need to be filed by.
April 15th.
Is that
But
accurate
there's
for?
there
maybe
was
for
something
nonprofit-
May
for
1st and they
nonprofits,
were doing an
for the
extension.
990? Yeah, I think they did an extension.
Yeah.
Do we owe that?
Generally speaking, you pay taxes.
I don't think we did either.
No, that's a dual amount, no, we're not. gonna
Oh, okay.
pay. They're gonna file it. Yeah,
So it just needs to be filed.
So, what I'd like to do is make a motion that the board approval to submit the tax returns pending final review by, the president.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Old business,
If we have any old business.
new business, the emergency relief fund guidelines and application.
So, in the interim between last meeting and this meeting, the staff was contacted for by a couple different parties for interest in the emergency, the existing emergency relief fund program. We scheduled a meeting with Kristen and Jim to kind of talk through, um, it was our intent to try to bring some clarity to the definition of emergency, to kind of clean up the application forms a little bit and to provide some, scoring recommendation criteria that the board could use when presented with applications to help guide those discussions a little bit better. In addition, this will lead a little bit into the next item as well. We kind of recognize that beyond just emergency, we're starting to see maybe some of the original intent of trying to provide some resources to building owners in downtown who are wanting to make improvements in building owners. And city staff has been working on a couple larger programs, but one of the things we were working on was more of a small scale facade program. And we felt that might be an appropriate opportunity to bring that to the EUEA, to fund and manage the small scale facade program. In our conversation with Jim and Kristen, I think what we recommend is that out of the existing pots of dollars for the remainder of 2026, that the board might allocate $50,000 out of each, towards each of these two programs, basically covering up to 10 projects if we see the need for that many. What I'd like to do is Talia actually prepared both the application revision and the evaluation sheet that was, so the application was actually in the packet. Not sure Arvis has the evaluation sheet, in order to, it was provided separately in today's packet, but I'd like to let Talia maybe kind of walk through the changes that we made in the application and to talk a little bit about the evaluation sheet and how that should help us. We can start with the emergency relief fund and then pending approval or whatever of that, then we can move into the building facade program.
So doing some research on what other kind of communities have done for their emergency relief funds, a lot of them in their first couple of paragraphs would kind of define what they saw an emergency was. So my goal in kind of reevaluating what the emergency fund looks like, I wanted to refocus kind of strictly on true emergencies, and I kind of took the definition. I think it's some community foundation in Fort Wayne that does emergency grants. They define emergencies as unforeseen, unbudgeted, and time sensitive, and I thought that was a really good kind of 3 key points in how we define an emergency. So that's kind of stated right away in the guidelines, but I tried to add clear eligibility requirements, that being the property owner, tenant with like lease authorization, saying that these emergencies are something that they have to cover or are authorized through the property owner to make these improvements or handle this emergency. So I believe the funding structure still stays the same, 5,000 per award, no matching funds required. We pay the contractors directly, and then no reimbursement for work already completed. So kind of things that we've done consistently throughout the emergency fund, but more looking at the application questions. I tried to gear it towards the explanation of how they see their emergency fitting that definition of unforeseen, time sensitive, and what was the third word? Unbudgeted. And then also making it a requirement for them to provide supporting documentation and photos to show kind of what the state of the current emergency is. And then alongside that, I added a 50-point scoring rubric to kind of standardize. I know sometimes it's hard to grant access to whether or not someone gets funding based on like what is an emergency. It's so subjective. So I tried to take what was written in the outline or the guidelines and the application itself to make a rubric to try and reduce that kind of subjectivity with a focus on severity, urgencies, and the documentation that they provide for the application. But other than that, that's kind of what's been changed on this application.
So as we look at the two programs to differentiate, I think the intent here is, this is emergency. We're not gonna require you to necessarily match the funds. If it's part of a broader and you are bringing funds, we ask that in the application. But there's no match requirement here. And then there are two eligible uses for funds, one being repairs to buildings or equipment. Again, I think what we would do is we manage that the same way we have. We would want them to include the contractor estimate, and we would pay the vendor directly. I think the other thing we did allow for in here is potentially utility or operational costs directly caused by the event, not general ongoing operating, or we're not expanding programs or things like that. We're just saying there was an interruption based on some kind of emergency, and now we can't pay this bill or whatever. And so likely what we'd like to do is get a copy of that utility bill or whatever that is. And we would do everything we can to not have to write a check to an organization. But if it were some extenuating circumstance, we could potentially authorize that. So I think that's what we tried to do here. That's the intent of this program, bring a little bit of clarity to that. Let them demonstrate to us those three criteria is either unbudgeted, it was unplanned for, unforeseen, and it's super time sensitive, right? So how do we bring some of that around? And hopefully, I think the rubric, evaluation sheet rubric is pretty, I think, it's pretty clear, but I think it provides us, a general guideline or pathway for the types of things we expect to see in the application or questions we get asked during. Any other thoughts or questions?
So is the idea gonna be that staff gets the application? Staff has the evaluation sheet and then brings them to the board for action?
I think we could definitely do an internal one. I think the intent is you guys have the evaluation sheet as well. And that once we could also email them out in advance of the packet. We would include them in the packet in advance of the meeting, and then you'd have an opportunity, to read through it and determine your own evaluation sheet as well. But we would definitely do that internally.
So would it be up to us? And first, this is great. Like, we have never really had like an evaluation sheet,
Right.
so great job. And like looking through that and really being able to define what an emergency is. I think that that's gonna clear up a lot of confusion. But looking at the emergency relief fund, was it left a little bit vague so we could decide what the 0 through 5, because like I'm looking, right? So would you get 2.5 for each one, or how are you thinking through that? Or is it kind of like up to us because then you aggregate the scores? What was your intention?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I don't think there's a point value directly related to it. I think it's based on your interpretation of what those factors are and how well the applicant communicated that in their application process, right?
Okay.
That's how we intend to do it. And I would assume that we would like, I think this is an opportunity. You don't have to, you can just listen to staff or whatever, but we want to make sure everybody has this. And we want to make sure that you have them in advance of the meeting so that you can score yourself.
Yeah, I would also add on that kind of like score out of 50 is more for people who kind of want to do that kind of quantitative decision making, but I don't know if I were to use it, I'd just kind of put additional comments and not really do a score myself.
Again, more of a guiding document
Yeah,
for helping make decisions.
that makes sense. I just wanted to verify on that one.
Yeah, I agree. It's much needed. Get some clarity on what is an emergency, what really is an emergency. I think it's great.
It'll also, when we get one versus another that come in, it'll allow us to kind of also judge
Right.
project to project.
That was the intent.
I think it definitely solves that issue that we've had for years.
So I think what we'd ask for at this time is if everybody's comfortable with the application, I'm sorry, Arvis, did you have anything that you wanted to add or contribute? Any questions?
No, I'm just reading through it right now. No, so far so
Okay.
good.
Okay,
Thanks, Sheriff, for
I think
sending
we-
it to me. I appreciate it.
so we would appreciate just a kind of formal adoption of this new application and adoption of the scoring guidelines, right? Then our intent would be to go ahead and distribute back out the new application. We had some folks reaching out. We weren't sure they were more appropriate for this versus, so we've got 3 or 4 potential applicants for either of these programs. We want to get it out to them, give them enough time to get it submitted, get it back out to you guys, and we'll go through potential timing of when we might see some of these and how we might want to look at future meetings, based on that. But we'd just like an adoption of this, I guess, formally as the board to say, yeah, we approve, we like this, and this is our official document that we're sending out in the future.
Would it make sense to do it as an appropriation of the 50,000 with this guy?
And I think there's room for an appropriation of $50,000.
Like, should we just do it all in one and say, we wanted to support the program with a $50,000?
Was that a motion?
Let me make sure I have the motion right, then I'll make it.
Uh,
Shoot, I'll just go for it. Ready? I'd like to make a motion to appropriate $50,000 to the, emergency relief fund. And have it executed as designed both by the application and evaluation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Okay, and so then looking at the second, the facade program,
So, this is the same thing as the building investment grant that the EVA's had before, kind of a name change to kind of reflect the program intent. With a focus on visible long-term building and kind of streetscape improvement with a clarification on eligible projects being facade improvements, signage, lighting, windows and doors, murals, and placemaking features with the addition of a definition of what placemaking is for clarity and consistency. So the requirements for these, we're recommending that there's a 1-to-1 private match required when it comes to these kind of projects and applications. Same for, the requirement of contractors going with the lowest qualified bidder and reflecting that within their application. And then no work being started prior to project approval. So same thing as emergency grant. With an updated application to require photos of proposed improvements and photos of current conditions. And additionally, a scoring rubric, focusing on readiness, impact, alignment with UEA priorities, and seeing that match requirement and where we're getting that match from. Yeah, you guys have questions?
so again, here, intent is, specifically physical improvements to the structure, exterior of the structure and or property to create, whether it's little gardens or, outdoor spaces or structural or facade changes, with a requirement of a match here. So unlike the last, so we're not doing any kind of operational or anything, just it's strictly physical construction and it's strictly, pay the contractor, pay the vendor, and there is a required match for this program.
I do have a question about the match just a little bit. What's an example of an in-kind contribution that's not cash or a documented resource?
Let's say, let's go to CCJ.
Got it. You got me. Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
I mean, where they're doing some of the work themselves.
Yep, or they have contractors who are donating in kind the labor for certain
Right.
things. Yep. Or donation of other equipment or other donation of others, if they're actually donating windows or if there are things that are being donated and then we're just paying for the installation or those kind of things, so.
And then looking at if awarded, UEA will pay contractors, vendors, or service providers directly whenever possible, rather than reimbursing the applicant. Is saying whenever possible leave us open too much?
I don't think it does. I think the intent is clearly, the former, but I do think it gives us at least a little bit of room in case a special circumstance arises. But I might leave that to the authorities. I
think the emergency application is the same.
Yeah, it is.
It said we want to pay the contractor budget, we need to pay, give ourselves room to be able to reimburse. Which, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I think we're clearly saying we would rather pay the contractor. And I think they would have to give us a pretty good reason for us not to. I
Right.
think.
And it's our money. We don't have to sign it and award it if they don't agree to that. So, right. So I think we'd look for a similar motion approving and appropriating dollars for the program.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to appropriate $50,000 from EVA to, the facade and placemaking grant guideline, opportunity. And, to have it be executed as outlined in the guidelines and evaluation sheet as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just one last clarification on that. These will only be commercial buildings. These are not for residential buildings. We're not tackling residents right now. It's just all commercial.
Yeah, I did, and that's in there. I did see it, it's commercial.
And apartments, is that considered?
So apartments are residential. So like, so let's take a couple of recent examples, right? So premium, whatever they are, the bought the, so that was an emergency on a residential building. It's my understanding, if they want to apply for funds on the Paul Thomas building, if it's for exterior facade remodeling or fixing some of those things, and they're putting money in as well, then they would be a great candidate for the facade program,
Thank you.
right?
Yeah, and what we've heard from that is there's some more like, internal things that I don't know, they're not the facade that we'd be working on, that we would be interested in considering that their match.
Right. Could potentially be their match.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Nice work.
So, understanding that we have some, so now we'd like to take this out, throw it back out to the folks who have contacted us that have some interest in the program. We'd like to propose that we give them a pretty quick turnaround. They've already submitted some application materials. They should be able to easily meet this and turn it around. We'd like to propose a meeting in May, to review and approve this initial round. And then what we'd like to do is to propose that based on our quarterly thing. So if we meet in May, then we have a follow-up meeting in August and a follow-up meeting in November, and just kind of stick to the quarterly, with the exception that if we get an emergency application in the meantime, we have the right to reach out to you guys and try to schedule an emergency meeting to review emergency applications. But in terms of the regular building facades, we just try to keep them on the quarterly meeting schedule. So we would look at working with Sherry to revise the meeting dates and times on a schedule that follows something like that. May, August, and November.
May, August and November.
Correct.
August, you could still get construction done. I was thinking for construction schedule, I mean, like November, you're getting into.
So that would be August 17th and November 16th.
Which gets us ahead of the holidays, so that should be fine.
May 18th, August 17th, November 16th.
May 18th might be tight. Might be something end of May. Because we gotta get the applications out and back in. And so we can send them out. But
There is a Memorial Day at the end.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
we can work around that. We'll work with you guys on dates and times. Sherry will get it scheduled out. That's what we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Arvin.
It's ours.
All right, guys. See you this evening.
We have 4:00.
Yes, we do have 4. Thanks, guys.
Uh-huh.